This photograph, taken on August 22, 2015, captures a Hawker Hunter jet performing at the Shoreham Air Show in West Sussex, England. The aircraft, a relic of Britain's aviation history from the 1950s, was piloted by Andy Hill, an experienced aviator and former Royal Air Force Harrier pilot. Hill was performing an aerobatic maneuver, a loop, the kind that thrilled airshow spectators. However, as the jet reached the apex of the loop, it failed to gain sufficient altitude to complete the maneuver. Moments later, the jet crashed onto the busy A27 road, a major thoroughfare running near the airshow. The resulting impact caused a devastating explosion, with fire and debris engulfing vehicles and reducing the scene to chaos. 11 people were killed in the crash, all of whom had no connection to the airshow itself. Among the victims were football players Matt Grimstone and Jacob Schilt, who were on their way to a game, Mark Trussler, a motorcyclist, Maurice Abrahams, a wedding chauffeur, and other unsuspecting commuters simply going about their day. The aftermath was harrowing. Footage from the scene showed columns of black smoke rising from the highway, vehicles ablaze, and emergency responders working amidst the wreckage. The road remained closed for over a week as investigators examined the crash site. The disaster was one of the deadliest airshow accidents in British history and led to significant changes in airshow safety regulations, including restrictions on aerobatic maneuvers near populated areas and public roads. Andy Hill, the pilot, miraculously survived despite sustaining critical injuries. He was placed in a medically induced coma and later faced charges of manslaughter by gross negligence. Prosecutors argued that his flying was reckless and that he should have abandoned the maneuver when it became clear the jet lacked the speed and altitude to complete it. However, Hill maintained that he had no memory of the crash and suggested he might have experienced cognitive impairment during the flight. In 2019, after a highly publicized trial, he was acquitted of all charges, with the jury finding that his actions did not meet the threshold for gross negligence. This seemingly ordinary photograph of a jet mid-display belies the horror that unfolded seconds later. Argument. Captured in Tehran, Iran in 1978 by French-Iranian photographer Abbas, this powerful image freezes an emotionally charged moment during the Iranian Revolution. The photograph shows a grief-stricken rioter holding the shoes of his slain comrade, who had been shot dead when military forces opened fire on a crowd of demonstrators. The soldier, defensive and tense, argues that it was not his unit that carried out the shooting. This photograph is part of Abbas's renowned collection, Iran Diary, 1971-2002, a work that documents the tumultuous period leading up to and following the Iranian Revolution. The revolution was marked by widespread protests against the Shah's regime, fueled by dissatisfaction over political repression, economic disparity, and cultural identity struggles. As tensions escalated, violent clashes between the military and demonstrators became tragically common, leaving thousands dead or injured. Timothy Treadwell, famously known as the Grizzly Man, was a dedicated bear enthusiast whose admiration for these creatures drove his passion for environmentalism and documentary filmmaking. His primary focus was the grizzly bears of Katmai National Park in Alaska. Starting in the late 1980s, Treadwell would spend each summer camping in the park, capturing intimate footage of these magnificent animals. Treadwell would set up camp in an area he called the Grizzly Sanctuary, a lush green field near Hollow Bay where bears congregated in a relaxed and non-aggressive state. This allowed him to approach the bears closely and film them with remarkable proximity. Later in the summer, he moved to a more densely forested region called the Grizzly Maze near Kaflia Bay. Here, the terrain's thick vegetation enabled him to get even closer to the bears, often unnoticed. Treadwell's behavior raised significant concerns among Katmai's park rangers. They deemed his methods reckless, as he routinely entered the personal space of these powerful predators, ignoring the inherent risks. Despite their warnings, Treadwell believed his interactions were safe, claiming to understand and connect with the grizzlies on a deeper level. His emotional attachment to the bears was evident, He even interacted with bear cubs, which the parent bears surprisingly tolerated. Treadwell felt accepted by the grizzlies, likening himself to one of their own. Typically, Treadwell spent his summers alone in Alaska with just his camera. However, in October 2003, he decided to extend his stay by a week, a risky choice given that grizzlies become more aggressive in October as they prepare for hibernation. Treadwell also invited his girlfriend Amy Huguenard to join him. Despite objections from friends and family, Treadwell was confident, insisting they would be safe. They set up camp along a grizzly trail in the Grizzly Maze, unarmed and without bear spray. When their pilot arrived to pick them up a week later, he noticed their campsite was still intact, and neither Treadwell nor Amy was at the shoreline. As the pilot approached, he spotted a large grizzly bear pacing the campsite, seemingly guarding something. When the bear moved towards him aggressively, the pilot retreated to his plane and called for park rangers. Upon reaching the campsite, rangers discovered a horrific scene. Treadwell and Amy's remains were scattered around, clearly the result of a bear attack. Their deaths were brutal, but the discovery of a video camera inside the tent made the tragedy even more haunting. The camera contained a 6-minute audio recording of the attack. Although the screen was blank, the sounds were disturbingly clear. The recording began with Treadwell leaving the tent after hearing a bear outside. The bear attacked him almost immediately, and Treadwell screamed for Amy to help. His cries of "It's killing me" are heard in the tape as the bear had his head in its jaws. Amy, paralyzed with fear, screamed back instructions to play dead, but it was futile. The recording captured Treadwell's desperate pleas for Amy to flee, but she stayed frozen in terror. After dragging Treadwell away, the bear returned for Amy, and her screams filled the audio before abruptly ceasing. This chilling recording provided a harrowing account of their final moments. The last known photo of Treadwell and Amy, taken after Amy arrived in Alaska, shows them preparing to venture into the Grizzly Maze, a journey that would end in unimaginable tragedy. This photograph captures MotoGP rider Marco Simoncelli during what appeared to be just another race. It was taken on October 23, 2011, during the Malaysian Grand Prix at the Sepang International Circuit. However, the image belies the devastating events that would unfold mere moments later. In the second lap of the race, he lost control of his bike in turn 11. Unlike most crashes, where a rider slides off the track, his bike veered back into the racing line, directly into the paths of Colin Edwards and Valentino Rossi. The collision was catastrophic, with his helmet being dislodged on impact. The race was immediately red flagged as emergency personnel rushed to the scene. He was quickly transported to the Trackside Medical Center, where medical staff performed CPR for 45 minutes. Despite their relentless efforts, at 16:56 local time, the 24-year-old rider was pronounced dead due to the severity of his injuries. Young Osama. This seemingly ordinary photograph captures a family on vacation in Sweden in 1971. Everyone appears relaxed and cheerful, enjoying their time together. However, second from the left in a brown shirt is a 14-year-old boy named Osama bin Laden. At the time, he was just one of 52 children in the wealthy and influential bin Laden family, who had made their fortune through construction in Saudi Arabia. No one could have foreseen the dark legacy that this teenager would leave behind. Osama bin Laden would grow up to become the founder of Al-Qaeda, an extremist militant organization responsible for some of the most infamous acts of terrorism in modern history, including the September 11 attacks in 2001. This photograph, taken in 2023, captures Samantha Miller and Eric Hutchinson radiating joy and love on the happiest day of their lives. Dressed in their wedding attire, celebrating their union with family and friends. However, the pure happiness immortalized in this image was shattered only moments later. As the newlyweds departed their wedding venue in a golf cart decorated with flowers and lights, a drunk driver, Jamie Komorowski, collided with their vehicle at high speed. The crash occurred in Folly Beach, South Carolina, turning what should have been the beginning of a beautiful life together into an unimaginable tragedy. Samantha Miller, just 34 years old, died at the scene. Her husband, Eric Hutchinson, survived but sustained severe injuries, including a brain injury, broken bones, and multiple surgeries. The driver, later found to have a blood alcohol level 3 times the legal limit, faced charges of reckless vehicular homicide and DUI. I will not be sued. I have the voice of an angel. On November 17, 1955, Maria Callas, one of the most celebrated opera singers of the 20th century, gave a mesmerizing performance at Chicago's Civic Opera House. But the true drama unfolded not on stage, but in her dressing room shortly after the performance. As Maria basked in her triumph, Marshal Stanley Pringle and Deputy Sheriff Dan Smith stormed in to serve her with a court summons for breach of contract. The lawsuit stemmed from a canceled performance, and the sudden confrontation left Callas enraged. "I will not be sued. I have the voice of an angel. No man can sue me," she shouted. A photographer captured the exact moment of her outrage. When the photo hit the press, it ignited public fascination, earning her the moniker, the Tigress. For Callas, however, the incident left a bitter taste, and she vowed never to perform in Chicago again. This photo captures a serene moment shared by Andrea Mazzetto and his partner during a hike in the picturesque hills of Rozzo, Italy. Smiling and carefree, the couple paused to document their adventure together. A selfie against a stunning natural backdrop. Tragically, this would become the final image of Andrea's life. Moments after this photo was taken, Andrea accidentally dropped his phone near the edge of a steep cliff. Determined to get it back, he went to the risky edge, but tragically lost his balance and fell over 600 feet to his death. The incident occurred on August 20th, 2022, leaving his partner and loved ones in shock and grief. Andrea, just 30 years old, was remembered as an adventurous individual who loved life. Rajiv Gandhi. This haunting photograph, taken moments before tragedy struck, captures the final moments of Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's life. Captured by an unnamed photographer on May 21, 1991, it was the last image taken of Gandhi before he was assassinated by a suicide bomber. The photo shows Gandhi, dressed in his signature white attire, greeting a woman who had approached him with a gesture of respect. However, the woman, who can be seen in the lower left of the image, adorned with orange flowers, was not there to offer a greeting, but to carry out a deadly act of violence. The woman, later identified as a member of the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, LTTE, a militant group involved in the Sri Lankan Civil War, detonated a bomb hidden on her person as she embraced the Prime Minister. The explosion killed Gandhi instantly, along with dozens of others in the immediate vicinity. Tragically, the photographer who captured this moment was also among the victims of the bombing. The attack on Gandhi was part of a larger wave of violence carried out by the LTTE, who had targeted him due to his involvement in the Sri Lankan Civil War. Gandhi had previously sent Indian peacekeeping forces to Sri Lanka in the 1980s to assist the Sri Lankan government in its conflict with the Tamil Tigers, which ultimately led to significant loss of Tamil lives and angered the LTTE. This haunting photograph, taken by Fred Hansen on November 12, 1928, shows members of the SS Vestris crew moments before disaster struck. The image shows a chaotic scene aboard a ship, tilting heavily to one side, with people struggling to maintain their balance. Many appear to be wearing life vests and are holding on to each other or nearby objects, clearly aware of the danger as the situation seems far from calm. The passenger ship, en route from New York to South America, had been battered by severe weather in the Atlantic, leaving it unstable and taking on water. Despite the worsening conditions, delays in issuing distress calls and organizing lifeboat evacuations contributed to the tragedy. As the ship listed heavily to one side, passengers and crew scrambled to abandon ship. However, chaos ensued, and many lifeboats were improperly launched or overturned in the rough seas. Of the 326 people aboard, 111 perished, including women and children. Investigations later revealed negligence in the ship's maintenance and the crew's response to the emergency. The tragedy led to reforms in maritime safety, including stricter inspections and better training for crew members. Atomic bomb detonation. Harold Edgerton, a pioneering physicist and photographer from MIT, forever changed the way we see the world through his invention of strobe light photography. Known for his iconic image of a bullet piercing an apple, Edgerton's innovations allowed for the capture of high-speed events with stunning clarity. His work eventually found its way into one of the most destructive and controversial arenas of the 20th century: atomic bomb testing. In 1947, Edgerton's research firm, Edgerton, Germeshausen and Greer, EG&G, was commissioned by the U.S. government to document atomic bomb tests in Nevada and the Pacific. The goal was to provide detailed visual analysis of nuclear explosions, an invaluable tool for military research and scientific understanding. Using his groundbreaking photographic techniques, Edgerton created some of the most striking and scientifically valuable images of atomic detonations. One of these images, captured on June 5, 1952, during the Operation Tumbler Snapper test series at the Nevada Proving Grounds, taken with a shutter speed of just 100 millionth of a second, the photograph freezes an atomic explosion at an almost inconceivable moment in time. The frame reveals the fireball, a blazing sphere of light and energy in its earliest and most intense moments. This photograph shows Brazilian priest Adelir Antonio de Carli preparing for his daring and unconventional journey in April 2008. Determined to break a world record, he planned to fly over 19 hours, suspended by 600 helium-filled balloons, combining his faith with a desire to raise awareness for a spiritual retreat. Father de Carli took off from the coastal city of Paranaguá, Brazil, equipped with a parachute, a GPS device, and a satellite phone. Initially, he appeared confident, even communicating with supporters from the air. However, as he drifted off course and over open ocean, he reported difficulties in navigating due to strong winds. Tragically, after losing contact, he disappeared, sparking a massive search and rescue operation. For weeks, speculation lingered that he might have survived a crash landing, clinging to the hope of his safe return. However, these hopes were extinguished when parts of his body were discovered washed ashore near Rio de Janeiro 2 months later. D-Day. On June 6, 1944, one of the most pivotal moments in World War II unfolded as Allied forces launched the largest seaborne invasion in history on the beaches of Normandy, France. This operation, known as D-Day, marked the beginning of the end for Nazi occupation in Western Europe. The harrowing events of that day were captured by renowned photographer Robert Capa, who was embedded with the troops. His images, though blurry and grainy, powerfully convey the chaos, terror, and sacrifice that defined the brutal landings. One of Capa's most iconic photographs from D-Day shows Private First Class Houston Riley, a 22-year-old soldier, caught in the midst of the battle. Riley had been struck by multiple bullets, but continued to press forward in the midst of the onslaught. As Capa's camera clicked, he witnessed the violence and horror of war up close. In a later recounting of the moment, Riley recalled his disbelief at seeing Capa on the beach. Capa, undeterred by the constant barrage of gunfire, spent about an hour and a half photographing the men around him as they fought for their lives. Many soldiers died within close proximity to him, but Capa continued his work, documenting the brutal reality of war as it unfolded before him. Despite the technical flaws, these photographs became some of the most iconic images of World War II, offering a raw, unfiltered glimpse into the inferno of the beach assault. This chilling photograph, taken by a passenger aboard Japan Airlines Flight 123 on August 12, 1985, captures what appeared to be an ordinary flight moment. Yet, unknown to those aboard, disaster was imminent. Just 12 minutes after takeoff from Tokyo's Haneda Airport, the Boeing 747 suffered a catastrophic structural failure caused by a faulty repair to its rear pressure bulkhead. To understand how this tragedy unfolded, we must go back to 1978, when the aircraft, a Boeing 747-146 SR, was involved in a significant incident during a domestic flight. While landing at Atami Airport, the plane suffered a severe tail strike due to an improper landing approach. Although none of the 394 passengers died, 25 were injured, and the aft pressure bulkhead, a critical component of the aircraft's pressurization system, sustained a significant crack. Japan Airlines lacked the expertise to repair such extensive damage and contracted Boeing to handle it. The repair process involved replacing a section of the bulkhead. Typically, overlapping sections are secured with 2 rows of rivets or a splice plate for additional support. However, a grave mistake occurred during the repair. Instead of properly installing a single splice plate, 2 separate plates were used, creating a flawed structure secured by only 1 row of rivets. To make matters worse, a seal concealed this error, allowing it to pass inspection unnoticed. Over the next 7 years, the aircraft endured over 12,000 pressurization cycles, causing the flawed bulkhead to slowly weaken. By August 12, 1985, undetected cracks had compromised the structure. Shortly after takeoff from Haneda Airport, the aft pressure bulkhead catastrophically failed, resulting in rapid cabin decompression. The explosion also tore off a large section of the aircraft's tail, including the vertical stabilizer and rudder, severing all 4 hydraulic systems and rendering the plane uncontrollable. The crew, unaware of the full extent of the damage, struggled to regain control. Without functional hydraulics, the aircraft entered an uncontrollable cycle of pitching and rolling motions. These erratic movements, compounded by oxygen deprivation in the depressurized cabin, made the situation even more harrowing for both passengers and crew. Despite their best efforts, the pilots were unable to stabilize the aircraft, which eventually collided with a mountain ridge, breaking apart and igniting on impact. The wreckage was located hours later, but rescue operations were delayed due to the challenging terrain and an assumption that there were no survivors. By the time help arrived, only 4 of the 524 on board were found alive. Survivors later described the harrowing aftermath, recalling the long night spent amidst the wreckage, haunted by the fading cries of others. Investigations revealed that many passengers had injuries that could have been survivable with earlier assistance. The disaster was traced back to the faulty repair, prompting changes in Boeing's maintenance practices. However, the tragedy dealt a severe blow to Japan Airlines, eroding public trust. Motel manager pouring acid in the water. One of the most harrowing and symbolic images of the civil rights movement was captured by photographer Horace Court on June 18, 1964. The photograph shows Jimmy Brock, the manager of the Monson Motor Lodge in St. Augustine, Florida, pouring muriatic acid into the motel's swimming pool. Below him, a group of white and black activists defy segregation by swimming together in the whites-only pool as part of a planned protest. This event occurred during a turbulent week in the civil rights movement. Just days earlier, Martin Luther King Jr. had been arrested at the very same motel for trespassing in its segregated restaurant. In response, civil rights activists staged a swim-in to challenge the discriminatory policies of the motel. White activists who rented rooms invited black participants as their guests to join them in the pool. The protest was met with hostility from Brock, who resorted to extreme measures to break up the demonstration. In a shocking act of aggression, he poured muriatic acid, commonly used for cleaning, into the pool in an attempt to intimidate the swimmers. Despite his actions, none of the protesters left the pool. The photograph became a stark representation of the violent backlash faced by activists fighting for equality during the 1960s. It vividly illustrates the lengths to which segregationists were willing to go to maintain racial divisions and the courage of those who stood up to these injustices. This incident, along with other protests in St. Augustine, played a pivotal role in pushing forward the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was signed into law just weeks later. The law prohibited segregation in public accommodations, marking a significant step toward racial equality in the United States. Childhood friends. Captured by photographer Jacques Gourmelin, this powerful image from April 6, 1972, in Saint-Brieuc, Brittany, France, became an enduring symbol of the emotional and personal toll of civil unrest. The photo was taken during a strike by workers from the Joint Francais Company, protesting against labor conditions and wage disparities. As tensions escalated, the CRS, France's National Riot Police, were deployed to suppress the demonstrations. The photograph freezes an emotionally charged moment between two men on opposite sides of the conflict. On the left stands Guy Bermieux, a striking worker, and on the right, Jean-Yvan Antignac, a riot policeman. The men, locked in a tense confrontation, are more than adversaries in this volatile scene. They are childhood friends who unexpectedly recognized each other amid the chaos. According to Gourmelin, Bermieux approached Antignac with tears of rage, grabbing him by the collar and shouting, "Go ahead and hit me while you're at it." Overcome by the weight of the situation, Antignac remained motionless, visibly conflicted and unwilling to respond with force against someone he once considered a friend. This photograph resonates because it captures the deeply human cost of societal and political divides. This photo, posted on October 31st, 2015, shows Olga Shaina's husband cradling their toddler as they prepare to board Metrojet Flight 9268 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. It was a moment of warmth and anticipation as the family was returning home to St. Petersburg, Russia, after a vacation. Sadly, this would be the last image of them alive. Shortly after takeoff, at 31,000 feet, the Airbus A321 disintegrated mid-air over the Sinai Peninsula. All 224 people aboard, including 25 children, were killed in what became the deadliest air disaster in Russian history. Investigators later determined that a bomb had been smuggled aboard the aircraft, hidden under a passenger seat in the rear cabin. This act of sabotage, targeting civilians, shocked the world and led to heightened scrutiny of airport security in the region. The Sinai branch of the Islamic State claimed responsibility, stating it was retaliation for Russian military intervention in Syria. Egyptian airport staff were suspected of involvement in the security breach, and subsequent investigations exposed lapses in safety protocols at Sharm el-Sheikh Airport. Deanna Wild. Deanna Wild, a 21-year-old who had recently separated from her husband, was living with two friends, Virginia and BJ McGinnis, both 54 years old. On April 2, 1987, the trio decided to visit Big Sur, a scenic yet perilous stretch of California's central coastline. They stopped at a cliff overlooking the ocean to take pictures. Afterward, as they prepared to leave, Deanna wanted to take a closer look at the edge. Tragically, she lost her footing and fell 500 feet to her death. Her death was initially ruled accidental, and law enforcement relied solely on Virginia's photographs taken before the incident instead of conducting a thorough investigation. Deanna's grieving mother couldn't afford a funeral and sought help from a lawyer, Steve Keeney, who attended her church. While making calls on her behalf, Keeney learned more about Deanna's death and uncovered a suspicious detail. Virginia and BJ had taken out a life insurance policy on Deanna just one day before the fatal fall. This discovery prompted Keeney to investigate further. Keeney found that Virginia had a history marred by numerous accidental deaths and suspicious fires, from which she had profited by cashing in life insurance policies. This revelation cast serious doubt on the accidental nature of Deanna's death. However, since no evidence was gathered at the scene and the investigation had been minimal, there was little to support any foul play. Undeterred, Keeney spent 5 years meticulously building a case against Virginia and BJ, ultimately leading to their arrest. During their trial, the grim truth behind Deanna's death came to light. That day, the trio had enjoyed a picnic at Big Sur, during which BJ secretly slipped some of his prescription antidepressants into Deanna's drink. The drugs made her extremely drowsy, to the point that Virginia and BJ had to support her as they walked. Taking advantage of her impaired state, they suggested going to the cliff to take more photos. Once there, BJ propped up the dazed Deanna at the edge of the cliff, while Virginia snapped a photo of the two with the ocean behind them. Moments later, BJ turned Deanna toward the water and pushed her off the edge. Horrifically, Deanna regained consciousness mid-fall and managed to grab onto the cliff's ledge. She begged for help, clinging desperately to the rocks. Rather than assist her, Virginia and BJ picked up stones and bludgeoned her hands until she lost her grip and plummeted to her death. The photographs Virginia took during this sequence proved to be their undoing. They clearly showed Deanna's deteriorated condition, contrasting with earlier photos taken that day. Virginia kept these pictures as trophies of her crime. It was eventually discovered that Virginia was an uncaught serial killer who had murdered numerous people to collect life insurance payouts, including her own 3-year-old daughter. BJ passed away during the trial, but Virginia was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The final photographs of Deanna taken by Virginia became key evidence in exposing the horrifying truth behind her death. This photo captures Carl Wallenda, the legendary high-wire performer, just moments before his fatal fall on March 22, 1978, in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Wallenda, known for his incredible balance and courage, was attempting a daring high-wire walk between two buildings, 121 feet above the ground, with no safety net below, a hallmark of his performances. Despite his vast experience and previous successes in similar feats, this walk would end in tragedy. As Wallenda made his way across the wire, he lost his balance and fell to the pavement below. The height and the impact led to fatal injuries. The crowd, initially unaware of the severity of the situation, was left in shock and disbelief as emergency personnel arrived on the scene. Carl Wallenda's death marked the end of an era for the Flying Wallendas, a family of acrobats famous for their death-defying stunts. His fall was attributed to a combination of factors, including a strong gust of wind and his age. He was 73 at the time of the accident. This photograph, captured by David Monderer from the pedestrian walkway of the Manhattan Bridge on the morning of September 11, 2001, shows a peaceful and serene view of New York City, with the World Trade Center towers standing tall against a clear sky. The image, taken at approximately 8:30 a.m., represents a moment of ordinary life, completely unaware of the horror about to unfold. Just 16 minutes after this photo was taken, at 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11, hijacked by terrorists, would slam into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, impacting between the 93rd and 99th floors. The explosion and ensuing fire were catastrophic, marking the beginning of one of the most devastating attacks in modern history. The collision ignited a sequence of tragic events, leading to the eventual collapse of both towers and the loss of nearly 3,000 lives. This image, taken from a vantage point of calm, was taken moments before a pivotal moment in history that changed the world forever. This photo captures Hendra Gunawan Sawal and his 3 friends aboard AirAsia flight QZ8501 on December 28, 2014, just moments before the aircraft's tragic departure from Surabaya, Indonesia. The group, appearing relaxed and excited, was on their way to Singapore for a holiday, unaware of the danger that lay ahead. Just 40 minutes after takeoff, the Airbus A320 encountered severe weather conditions while flying over the Java Sea. The flight crew had requested to climb to a higher altitude to avoid the storm, but as they began the ascent, the aircraft experienced a catastrophic electrical failure. The plane's autopilot was disengaged, and the crew struggled to regain control in turbulent conditions. The loss of control led to a rapid descent, and at 6:24 a.m., the plane crashed into the Java Sea, claiming the lives of all 162 people aboard. Investigations revealed that a combination of technical failures, weather conditions, and pilot errors contributed to the disaster. This photograph, taken during a live television broadcast on August 26, 2015, shows Allison Parker, a young and talented journalist, in the middle of an interview for WDBJ-7 in Moneta, Virginia. Parker, along with her cameraman Adam Ward, was conducting a routine segment when their lives were abruptly cut short. Just moments after this photo was taken, a former co-worker of Parker's, Vester Lee Flanagan, approached the scene and opened fire on both Parker and Ward. The attack, which occurred live on air, was broadcasted to thousands of viewers, leaving the public in shock and horror. Flanagan, who had previously been fired from the station, filmed the shooting and later posted it on social media. He then fled the scene, leading to a nationwide manhunt. The tragic incident claimed the lives of both Parker and Ward, leaving behind a legacy of their work and dedication. Tereska's Scrawls. Taken in 1948 by David Seymour, one of the founders of Magnum Photos and a prominent photojournalist of the 20th century, this haunting photograph speaks volumes without uttering a single word. The setting is a home for emotionally disturbed children in post-war Warsaw, a place where the scars of World War II lingered in the young lives it sheltered. On this particular day, the children were asked to draw their idea of home on the blackboard. While most children sketched houses and family scenes, Tereska's contribution was markedly different. Her chalk scrawls were chaotic, erratic lines that defied traditional interpretation. But perhaps the most striking element of the image is not the drawing itself, but Tereska's expression. Her piercing, haunted gaze tells a story of trauma that words cannot capture. Tereska had grown up in a concentration camp, a place where the concept of home was likely replaced with terror, loss, and unimaginable suffering. Her drawing, though indecipherable, seems to embody the chaos and pain etched into her memory. Seymour's work as a photojournalist often delved into themes of humanity and its fragility, and Tereska's Scrawls remains one of his most enduring pieces. This photograph captures Marco Siffredi, the fearless French snowboarder, just before embarking on his historic attempt to descend Mount Everest in 2002. Known for his daring exploits, Siffredi was determined to conquer the world's highest peak on his snowboard, a feat that had never been successfully completed. On the morning of September 8, 2002, after summiting Everest without supplemental oxygen, Siffredi began his descent from the summit, poised to make history. He was attempting to ride down the face of the mountain, through the treacherous Lot's Face, a slope feared by even the most experienced climbers. Sadly, Siffredi never returned from his descent. His tracks were lost in a fierce storm, and he was never seen again. Despite extensive search efforts, no trace of him was found. His disappearance remains one of the great mysteries of modern mountaineering. In the early 1950s, a young boy named Issei Sagawa experienced a chilling dream where he and his brother were being boiled alive as a meal. Upon waking, Sagawa found himself consumed by the thought of being on the opposite side of the pot, outside it, watching a human cook inside. This unsettling idea took root in his mind, growing into an obsession with consuming human flesh. By the time he reached first grade, he was already fantasizing about biting into his classmates' legs, his mouth watering at the mere sight of them. For the next 30 years, Sagawa managed to suppress these horrific urges. However, in 1981, while living in Tokyo, his dark desires became uncontrollable. One summer day, he spotted a woman on the street whom he felt an overwhelming urge to eat. Unable to resist, he followed her to her apartment, waited until she was inside, then climbed in through a window. Once inside, he realized he had no plan for what to do next. As he stood there, paralyzed with indecision, the woman woke up and screamed, prompting him to flee. Following this incident, Sagawa sought help from a psychiatrist, confessing that he had broken into the woman's home with the intent to eat her. The psychiatrist deemed Sagawa a high-risk threat to society, stating that he had already begun acting out his fantasies. However, Sagawa's wealthy and influential father intervened. Refusing to let his son face serious consequences, he used his power to bury the psychiatrist's findings and had Sagawa sent to Paris under the guise of furthering his education. In Paris, Sagawa enrolled at the Sorbonne University to study literature, but his cannibalistic urges resurfaced. Instead of seeking further psychiatric help, Sagawa began scouting for a victim. He fixated on finding a tall, beautiful Western woman, whom he believed could somehow transfer her strength and beauty to him through consumption. Eventually, he set his sights on René Hartevelt, a 25-year-old Dutch student attending the same university. Using money from his father, Sagawa hired René to tutor him. cultivating a friendship and gaining her trust. One evening, he invited her to his apartment. While Renee sat with her back turned, Sagawa retrieved a rifle and attempted to shoot her, but the gun jammed. Unaware of his intentions, Renee remained unharmed, and Sagawa decided to act as if nothing had happened. Still, he interpreted the failed attempt as a possible sign that he should abandon his plan. Yet, his obsession overpowered his doubts. The next evening, Sagawa invited Renee back to his apartment. This time, when he fired the rifle, it worked. For a fleeting moment, he considered calling for help, but he quickly dismissed the thought, convincing himself that he had waited too long for this opportunity. Attempting to bite into her immediately, Sagawa found it too difficult and unappealing. Undeterred, he left his apartment to purchase a knife, returned, and began methodically cutting into Renee's body, consuming her flesh over the next 2 days. Throughout the ordeal, he took photographs of himself engaging in the act. Once satiated, Sagawa stored parts of Renee's remains in his freezer, packed others into suitcases, and attempted to dispose of them in a nearby lake. However, the weight of the suitcases and his suspicious behavior attracted the attention of bystanders, leading to a police inquiry. When officers inspected the luggage, they discovered Renee's remains. Sagawa confessed on the spot, stating plainly that he had killed her to eat her flesh. Sagawa spent 2 years in a French prison awaiting trial. When his case finally went before a judge, the crime was deemed so grotesque that the judge ruled Sagawa insane and unfit to stand trial, ordering his indefinite commitment to a mental institution. Soon after, French authorities deported him to Japan, expecting him to remain institutionalized. However, due to sealed court records, Japanese officials were unable to access the details of his crime, leaving them without grounds to detain him. In 1986, Sagawa walked out of the mental institution a free man. Since his release, Sagawa has lived openly in Japan, profiting from his infamy. He has written books, appeared on television, and even been invited to serve as a food critic. Shockingly, he has expressed a desire to commit cannibalism again, stating that he cannot die without fulfilling his craving to consume another human. This is the reality of a man who blatantly killed and ate someone, openly admits to it, and continues to walk free, exploiting his notoriety to this day. Tadeusz Żydkiewicz holding a picture of himself. The image of Tadeusz Żydkiewicz holding a photo captures a deeply significant moment in medical history. The photo he holds was awarded the title of National Geographic's Best Picture of 1987. It portrays Dr. Zbigniew Religa, a pioneering Polish cardiac surgeon, sitting beside his patient, Żydkiewicz, after Poland's first successful heart transplant. The surgery had lasted a grueling 23 hours, and in the photo, Dr. Religa monitors Żydkiewicz's vitals, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. In the lower right corner of the frame, one of Religa's colleagues is seen collapsed in sleep, utterly spent after the marathon operation. At the time, heart transplant surgeries were fraught with peril and skepticism, especially in Poland, where access to advanced medical technology was limited under the communist regime. Despite these challenges, Religa undertook the procedure, knowing the odds were against him. His determination paid off, saving Żydkiewicz's life and pushing the boundaries of what was medically possible. The most striking detail of this story is that Żydkiewicz not only survived the surgery, but went on to outlive his surgeon, Dr. Religa, who passed away in 2009 due to lung cancer. In the chaos of World War I, a hero emerged from an unexpected place, a homing pigeon named Cherami. This brave bird played a critical role in saving the lives of nearly 200 soldiers in October 1918 during the infamous Lost Battalion incident in the Argonne Forest. Trapped behind enemy lines, with no means of communication, and under heavy fire, the 77th Division of the U.S. Army faced imminent annihilation. Their only hope was to send a desperate plea for help via carrier pigeon. Cherami carried the soldiers' message, which read, "We are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it." Despite being shot multiple times during the journey, losing an eye and part of her leg, Sher Ami persevered and completed her mission. She delivered the message to headquarters, allowing the artillery fire to cease and reinforcements to locate and rescue the trapped battalion. In recognition of her extraordinary courage, Sher Ami was treated as a war hero. She was fitted with a small wooden leg and awarded France's prestigious Croix de Guerre medal for her service. The name Sher Ami, meaning dear friend in French, was a token of gratitude from the soldiers she saved. Interestingly, despite being named with the masculine form of Ami, the pigeon was later discovered to be female. This photo captures a moment of domestic violence that speaks volumes about the darker realities of relationships often hidden from public view. Taken by renowned photographer Donna Ferrato in 1982, the image features a suburban couple, Elizabeth and Bengt, whom Ferrato had met during a project documenting the lives of wealthy singers. That night, in their seemingly idyllic home, an argument erupted between the couple. As Ferrato's camera clicked, the confrontation escalated, and Elizabeth was struck by her partner. When Ferrato attempted to publish the image, she encountered staunch resistance. Editors deemed the subject too controversial, refusing to highlight domestic abuse in their magazines. But Ferrato was undeterred. She believed it was imperative to expose the hidden epidemic of domestic violence. In 1991, she published Living with the Enemy, a groundbreaking book chronicling the lives of victims of domestic abuse. The book not only shed light on a topic that was often ignored or dismissed, but also galvanized public discourse around the issue. The youngest mother. In one of the most shocking cases in medical history, Lina Medina, a Peruvian girl born on September 23, 1933, became the youngest confirmed mother at the age of just 5. Lina's parents took her to the hospital, alarmed by her rapidly growing abdomen, suspecting a tumor. Instead, doctors discovered an unthinkable reality. Lina was 7 months pregnant. This extraordinary case was attributed to a rare condition called precocious puberty, which causes early onset of sexual and physical development. Lina had fully functional reproductive organs at an age when most children are only beginning to understand the world around them. On May 14, 1939, Lina gave birth via cesarean section due to her small pelvic structure. The baby boy, named Gerardo after one of the doctors who delivered him, was healthy and weighed 2.7 kilograms. The circumstances surrounding Lina's pregnancy remain a disturbing mystery. An Armenian man dances for his lost son. This poignant and unforgettable photograph, taken by Antoine Agougian in 1998, captures a profound moment of grief, resilience, and cultural identity. Agougian, a celebrated French photographer of Armenian descent, was visiting Aparan, a town near Armenia's capital Yerevan. On that day, a local dance troupe was performing outdoors, with the community gathered to watch. As he began photographing the performance, an elderly man approached him, his face streaked with tears. The man, Ishran, shared his story. His son, his pride and joy, had tragically died from electrocution. In a heart-wrenching twist, Ishran told Agougian that he resembled his lost son. Moved by the encounter, Agougian asked Ishran if he would dance for him. What followed was a performance as raw and emotional as it was symbolic. Ishran began to dance, his movements an expression of his anguish and love, his grief and defiance. The dance troupe paused to observe, their figures silhouetted against the rugged Armenian mountains, adding depth and context to the moment. This chilling dashcam footage captures the final moments of TransAsia Flight 235 as it plummets into the Keelung River in Taiwan on February 4, 2015. The footage, recorded by a vehicle on the ground, shows the aircraft struggling to stay airborne after losing engine power shortly after takeoff from Taipei Songshan Airport. The pilots were attempting to restart the failed engine, but they mistakenly shut down the working engine instead, exacerbating the situation. The aircraft, an ATR-72 turboprop, became uncontrollable and fell into the river, impacting a bridge and narrowly missing cars on the road below. Out of the 58 people on board, only 15 survived, with many sustaining severe injuries. The disaster prompted an investigation that revealed serious flaws in pilot training, particularly in handling engine failure scenarios. Behind the counter. Captured on May 28, 1963, this powerful photograph freezes a moment of defiance and degradation in the heart of the American civil rights movement. Taken by Fred Blackwell, a photographer for the Jackson Daily News, the image depicts a sit-in at a Woolworth's whites-only lunch counter in Jackson, Mississippi. Seated from left to right are John Salter, a sociology professor, and students Joan Trumpauer and Ann Moody, all from Tougaloo College, a historically black institution that served as a vital hub for civil rights activism in Mississippi. The trio, steadfast and resolute, represented a challenge to entrenched racial segregation in the South. As they silently demanded the basic human right to be served equally, they were met with a storm of hatred. An enraged white mob surrounded them, pouring ketchup, mustard, and sugar over their heads and bodies. The protesters endured slurs, physical intimidation, and attempts to provoke them into retaliation. Yet they remained stoic. Tougaloo College, where the three protesters were based, was instrumental in training and supporting activists during the civil rights era. It became a safe haven for organizing efforts, and its students and faculty frequently risked their lives to challenge systemic racism. The image, widely circulated after its publication, galvanized support for the civil rights movement by exposing the world to the ugliness of segregation. Soviet soldiers harassing a German woman. This harrowing photograph captures a deeply disturbing moment during the aftermath of World War II. Taken near the West Hall section of the Leipzig Hauptbahnhof railway terminus, it shows two Soviet soldiers openly harassing a German woman. While the image itself is deeply unsettling, the context surrounding it reveals an even graver reality. During the Soviet occupation of German territories at the end of the war, sexual violence became a widespread and devastating consequence of the conflict. Historians estimate that as many as 2 million German women were victims of rape, with some subjected to this brutal violence repeatedly, in instances as horrific as 60 to 70 times. These atrocities were not isolated or incidental. In many cases, they were committed as acts of dominance and revenge, an assertion of power over a defeated enemy. This photo, taken on November 28, 2016, shows the Chapecoense football team and crew smiling together before boarding Lamia Flight 2933. Spirits were high as the team, based in the small Brazilian city of Chapecó, was flying to Medellin, Colombia, to play in the Copa Sudamericana finals, a historic moment for the club. Tragically, the celebration was short-lived. During the flight, the Avro RJ-85 aircraft ran out of fuel just moments before reaching its destination. Investigations later revealed that the flight had departed with insufficient fuel reserves, and the crew failed to declare an emergency in time. The combination of fuel exhaustion and electrical failure caused the plane to crash into a mountainside near Medellin. Out of the 77 passengers and crew on board, 71 lost their lives, including most of the players, staff, and journalists accompanying the team. Miraculously, 6 people survived, including 3 players who would later carry the memory of their fallen teammates forward. An injured young mill worker. This poignant photograph, taken in October 1912, shows 11-year-old Giles Edmund Newsom, a victim of the harsh realities of child labor in early 20th century America. Earlier that year, while working at the Sanders Spinning Mill in Bessemer City, North Carolina, Giles endured a devastating accident. A piece of machinery fell on his foot, smashing his toe and causing him to fall onto a spinning machine. The accident crushed and tore out 2 of his fingers, permanently disabling him. Giles and his younger brother had been working at the mill for several months before the incident, part of a widespread practice where impoverished families relied on the meager wages their children could earn. After the accident, the family dynamic took a troubling turn. Giles's father, learning that any compensation from the mill would go directly to his injured son rather than to the parents, sought a compromise, while the boy's mother blamed them for taking the jobs in the first place. His aunt expressed a bitter lament, stating, "Now he's just got to where he could be of some help to his ma. And then this happens, and he can't never work no more like he oughter." The last laugh. This unsettling photograph captures Richard Hickok and Perry Smith moments after hearing their death sentences for the brutal murder of the Clutter family in Holcomb, Kansas. In 1959, the two men meticulously planned to rob the Clutters, believing a rumor that the family kept a safe filled with cash in their home. However, their plan unraveled when they found no such fortune, only a meager $50. Frustrated and desperate, they murdered all four family members, including two children, in a crime that shocked the nation. What makes this image so haunting is Perry Smith's casual smile, as if oblivious to the gravity of his fate. Without context, the photograph could easily be mistaken for a mundane moment, but knowing the backstory, the smile becomes chilling. Their story gained even more notoriety through Truman Capote's seminal book, In Cold Blood, which meticulously chronicled the crime, the investigation, and the psychological complexities of the two killers. On July 30th, 2016, Janice Stewart was at her home in College Station, Texas, preparing for a wedding she was set to photograph the following week. Her daughter, 34-year-old Sunday Rowan, who lived in San Antonio, planned to join her as an assistant. That morning, Sunday shared photos with Janice via Snapchat, excitedly documenting a hot air balloon trip she was taking with her husband, Matt Rowan. The trip had been delayed for over a year due to bad weather, but on this clear day, it was finally happening. Sunday had given Matt the tickets as a birthday gift. Matt was a highly respected burn researcher and led clinical trials at Brooke Army Medical Center. Sunday worked at a children's clothing store and was dedicated to her young son from a previous relationship. Together, she and Matt enjoyed adventurous outings to escape their demanding schedules. The photos Sunday sent showed the balloon being prepared and captured happy moments of her and Matt enjoying the beautiful Texas countryside from the air. Tragically, these would be the last messages Janice received from her daughter. Later that morning, near Maxwell, Texas, a loud explosion startled local residents. Rancher Buddy Miller saw smoke rising in the distance and rushed to the scene. He found a fiery wreck at the base of a power line tower. First responders initially thought it was a tractor fire, but soon discovered the remains of a hot air balloon basket and human bodies. It was a devastating accident. The balloon's pilot, 49-year-old Skip Nichols, had decided to fly despite poor weather that grounded other operators. Investigation revealed he had drugs in his system, impairing his judgment. Flying through low clouds, he collided with high-voltage power lines. The wires severed the balloon's cables, and liquid propane ignited the basket, causing it to plummet over 100 feet to the ground. When Janice saw news reports of the crash, she immediately recognized the balloon from Sunday's photos. Although official confirmation hadn't yet arrived, she knew her daughter and son-in-law were among the victims. The crash claimed the lives of all 16 people on board, making it one of the deadliest hot air balloon accidents in U.S. history. Flight of refugees across wrecked bridge in Korea. Captured on December 4, 1950, by Associated Press photographer Max Desfour, this powerful and haunting image depicts the desperate flight of refugees fleeing the horrors of war during the Korean War. The scene takes place on a wrecked bridge spanning the Taedong River in North Korea, where a group of civilians, their lives shattered by the ongoing conflict, scramble to escape the advancing Chinese communist troops. The refugees, overwhelmed by fear and the chaos of war, find themselves caught between the devastation of the conflict and the uncertain hope of survival. In the photograph, men, women, and children are packed tightly together, clutching whatever belongings they could carry as they rush toward the relative safety of South Korea. The urgency and peril of the moment are palpable in Desfour's photograph, which captures the raw human emotion of those desperate to escape the rapidly encroaching danger. Leap into freedom. Following World War II, Berlin was divided into 4 occupation zones controlled by the Allied powers. By the late 1940s, tensions between the Soviet-controlled East and the Western Allies escalated, creating stark contrasts in living conditions. East Berlin faced economic hardship, restricted freedoms, and oppressive surveillance, prompting about 2 million East Germans to flee to the West between 1949 and 1961. To curb the mass exodus, East German leader Walter Ulbricht ordered the construction of barriers in August 1961, the first iteration of what would become the Berlin Wall. In the early days of this division, 19-year-old border guard Hans Conrad Schumann found himself stationed at a barbed wire barricade. Disillusioned with the oppressive regime and enticed by the freedom promised by the West, Hans made a spontaneous and daring decision. As crowds in West Berlin shouted encouragement, Hans tossed aside his rifle and leapt over the barbed wire. Photographer Peter Liebing captured the precise moment of Hans's jump. Hans settled in West Germany, living a quiet life away from the spotlight. However, his symbolic act brought him unexpected fame, which he struggled to reconcile with his personal life. Haunted by feelings of isolation and the weight of being a symbol, Hans tragically ended his life in 1998. The photograph remains an enduring reminder of individual defiance against oppression and the human desire for liberty. SS Grand Camp. At first glance, the photo of the SS Grand Camp docked in Texas City appears unremarkable, a cargo ship being tended to on what seems like an ordinary day. But this image freezes a moment of calm before catastrophe. It is April 16, 1947, and a fire has broken out aboard the ship. The dock is bustling with members of the Texas City Volunteer Fire Department, who are working desperately to contain the flames. Unbeknownst to them, the SS Grand Camp is carrying over 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate, a highly explosive substance commonly used as fertilizer. The heat from the fire is steadily destabilizing the volatile cargo, and within minutes of this photograph being taken, the ship will explode in a devastating blast. The detonation was so powerful that it destroyed much of the port and surrounding areas, creating a massive fireball visible for miles. The explosion shattered windows as far as 40 miles away and was registered on seismographs hundreds of miles from the site. Buildings were flattened, nearby ships were obliterated, and fires raged for days. The Texas City disaster claimed the lives of 468 people, including almost all the firefighters in the photo, and injured over 5,000 more.